Hi, and welcome back to Old School. Today, our teacher will be Raeanne Newquist. She works for Mercies, which we get into all the details of what that means, and some of you have probably even heard of them. They are a couple of ships that go around the world to countries where folks don't have access to medical care, and they pull into port and just get rocking and rolling. But we talk about all the things that have to happen before that, during that, and how you can be a part. Also, we talk about her journey and where she comes into this employment with Mercy Ships, as well as her faith journey. So I am so excited today to have her in class and that you're here to join us. So welcome, Reanne.
I did grow up in a Christian home and gave my life to Jesus at a young age. And really, I think, kind of getting to how we ended up serving in West Africa as a family, I think a lot of it has to do with my growing up. My father worked all over the world. And I was really raised with a lot of different cultures because he would bring home those cultures to our family. My mom traveled with my father every fall, and then she as well would come home and cook us meals from all over the world. My father's business associates would come visit us, and I really grew up with a desire to travel and an excitement for other cultures and other nations. So, flash forward to being married with three children. My husband and I actually met at a church in Southern California doing ministry. And my husband actually left church ministry. He was a pastor to become a first responder. And he was a sergeant with the California Highway Patrol for almost 20 years and really ministered to that community by being one of them. But as he was nearing his coming closer rather to his eligibility of retirement, he really felt like he wanted to get back into full-time ministry, but not so much church ministry. And we had been supporting a friend of ours who was a volunteer on board the Africa Mercy for several years. We'd never heard of Mercy Ships before, but when she came to us and said, would you, financially partner with me and pray for me as I go? We said, yeah, we love you. And we learned a lot about the ministry because of her. So all of a sudden, my husband is eligible to retire. He's looking around for ministries to be a part of, and Mercy Ships is on his radar. And they are looking for a chaplain in 2019. And he said, I think maybe we could do this. And I thought, there's no way in the world that my very conservative, law enforcement first responder husband is going to take his wife and three children to live on a hospital ship in West Africa. I just thought, that was me. I was more the reckless, crazy one. For years, I said, quit your job. Let's go do something, and he's like, no, we have to be responsible. We have to provide. And so I did not take him seriously. But God really put a call on his life, and he became obsessed with all things Mercy Ships. He got on YouTube and watched every Mercy Ships video that there is out there, cried through all the patient stories, and was intrigued by all the crew posting videos about their experiences on board, got the kids involved in watching all these videos. Meanwhile, I'd be in the kitchen making dinner. Come on, Mom, come watch with us. I'm like, no, it's okay. There's no way in the world this is ever going to happen. I didn't want to get my hopes up because it really would probably be my biggest dream to go do something so crazy with our family. But I was totally wrong because my husband was obedient. When God said go, he said, let's do this. And the kids were all on board. And it really kind of awoken in me a dream that I had years ago from a child and seeing, all the cultures in my family growing up of just traveling the world. But I thought once I married this man, we weren't really on the same page. So I thought that was, a closed door. But God said, no, it just wasn't the right time. And so really, we ended up taking our kids on the adventure of a lifetime. And it was amazing.
How awesome. I have to say, this is so funny because when I saw the offer of having you on the podcast and because of Mercy Ships come through my email, When I was married, I'm divorced now 7 years, but when I was married and I had asked my husband at the time, when can I start taking our daughter on mission trips?
Hmm.
I wanted to take her as soon as she was eligible. So when she was 6 years old, we went with the Southern Baptists to New Orleans to help with what they call Project Noah, I think it was called, where the men were going and rebuilding houses that were totally destroyed, and then
Hmm.
families were going to like clean up and whatever. So she was 6 and we did that. So then we went on mission trips to Europe, to Slovakia to teach English and do some other things. And I somehow Mercy ships came across my radar
Oh,
and I
wow.
started watching stuff and I get motion sick and it's not a pretty picture. Um, However, I was drilling down and I saw that you have to raise your own money.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I can't be any part of the medical community, but I had been a pastry chef and a sous chef. So, okay,
Oh,
maybe I
fun.
could be part of the food,
Yes.
whatever. Um, and it just looked cool. It looked like it
Yeah.
could be fun. And we were homeschooling my daughter in junior high. So I was like, how hard could this be? Except for that my ex wouldn't have been able to go too. It couldn't have been a
Hmm.
call on our family.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's not that it hasn't stayed on my radar, but I just went on a cruise in April and I had to take Bonine every day. So I'm
Oh my
like, do I
goodness.
really want to go be drugged for a year?
Well, actually, you might be encouraged to know that our ships pull into port for 10 months. They're not sailing.
Oh,
So
okay.
you are stable and secure. There is no motion sickness whatsoever because
Okay.
you're basically a parked car, but you're a docked boat, a docked ship rather. And so if you're not a part of the sail, which all of our crew are not part of the sail, then you don't go anywhere.
Where does
There's
it
no
sail
drugs.
from, out of curiosity?
So we have two vessels in our fleet, and one currently is in Madagascar. So on the eastern side of Africa, they'll sail back and forth from South Africa up to Madagascar or, different countries. And then our other ship, the Global Mercy, kind of our home port as Mercy ships, if you will, is really the Canary Islands in Tenerife. And so if one of our vessels is on the western side of Africa, they will go to Tenerife for any of their maintenance period, which usually, like I said, we'll pull into port for 10 months in a country, and then we'll take off for 2 months for our maintenance period. And our crew are flying in and out of the ship all the time. Most people do not sail from either Tenerife to, like our family sailed from Tenerife to Senegal, which was only a 3.5 day sail. But most people would fly right into Senegal and then board the ship and never sail at all. So no motion sickness drugs are
Interesting.
necessary. And we could always use a pastry chef, I'm telling you.
How fun. Oh, that would be so awesome. I mean, I really was, like I said, I was excited and I started
Yeah,
watching stuff too. And I was like, this is so precious. But I just assumed out of the gate, and I bet a lot of people do,
sure.
that you had to have some kind of medical background to go
No,
on there and participate. But there has to be a whole
right.
crew to take care of everybody,
Well,
you
it's a
know.
city.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a
Yeah.
floating city. So, yes, we are hospital ships that do surgery. We're not just general medicine.
Right.
We have about 6 areas of specialty that we perform surgeries in. But it takes a whole village to run this ship. So we have obviously maritime crew. We do have galley staff that cook all the meals for our crew. We have dining room staff, hospitality, HR. We have baristas. We have teachers on board because families come, like we brought our family. And there are fully accredited academies on board our ship where we teach children from preschool all the way to graduating seniors in high school. And
Wow.
teachers come from all over the world to volunteer. I served in the communications department where we deal with our photographers, videographers, and writers who create all of our marketing materials, but also tell the stories of our patients and all the transforming work that God is doing in their lives through Mercy Ship. So I always tell people if you have a skill, we need it.
How fascinating. You know what? I think my daughter would absolutely like that wheelhouse that you were just talking about. She's going to Arizona State University to
Yeah.
get her English degree in creative writing, and he wants to ultimately be like a novelist as well as some other things. But being in the, wanting to screenwrite, wanting to
Yeah.
write stories, wanting to be
Hmm.
in that wheelhouse. How awesome, because as a believer, she does like to serve in ministry as well. This would be
Yeah.
incredibly fascinating, and it might be
Oh,
fun
yeah.
for
It's so
something
much
we could
fun.
do at the same time if that.
Yes, absolutely.
Can you
We
send me a
actually,
packet?
yeah, of course. We actually have a fun family on board right now. The woman actually that we sponsored and supported years ago, she went as a kindergarten teacher on board.
Oh, how
And
fun.
she's been on board now for almost or over 8 years. She met her husband on board, a man from Switzerland, and they got married a year ago, which was
I'm
exciting. But
looking for one
her
of those too. No.
they don't call it the love boat for nothing, let me tell you. I mean, lots of people have met their spouses and gotten married on the
Well,
ships.
because how we're
Many,
better.
many. Yes.
I've had so many people tell me, not just as a Christian, but as a woman looking for a specific, like my little list for my man,
Yeah,
is to go where they're doing something that I'm interested in. And I am
absolutely.
definitely interested in ministry. Like my book, part of the proceeds is, it contains a lot of abuse. It's a memoir and it
Mm,
contains a lot of abuse and that healing and stuff. And so I have been involved in ministries that are trying to stop sex trafficking or domestic abuse or things of that nature.
yeah,
But just ministry in general, if I can go somewhere
right.
where I can connect, and that would be perfect. What a perfect
Oh my
storm right
gosh.
there.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? There was this wonderful woman on board when our family was on board. Her name was Irene, and she's from Canada. She had served on Mercy ships for a 3-month stint. I don't remember what department, but she didn't have the most favorable of experience. And when we were on board, she was back on board. And so I got to know her a little bit and was asking her, why did you decide to come back if it wasn't a great experience the first time? And she said, because I just knew something was off and I knew that that wasn't right and that there had to be more that I was missing out on. So she said, I just felt like God was saying, come back. And so she was there serving in the galley. Um, Anyways, when she was flying from Canada to the ship, I don't remember. I'm probably butchering her story, but from what little bits I remember, whatever country she had to stop over in, she met this man who was also flying to Senegal to serve with Mercy ships. And you often find that on your travels over, you'll meet up with other people, other crew that are coming. Anyways, long story short, she married that man. And now she lives in England with him. They're both, I think, I know for her, it's her second marriage. And, just amazing how God was like, no, I have something more for you. Go back. And she ended up meeting her spouse on board later in life. There's a lot of people on board
I'm
who, are
62, so
young
it's
and
definitely later.
yeah. But,
Well,
so
maybe this was a
exciting.
divine appointment for more reasons than one.
You never know. You never know. But
So,
yeah,
okay.
the
So, you're
community on
not
board.
serving on the ship now, then I take it?
I'm sorry, what?
You're not serving on the ship right now?
No, 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 no. So we unfortunately got on board in 2019
Oh,
with a
COVID.
2-year commitment. And yes, we all know how that ended. So we didn't even get to serve out our full commitment as a family. And it was rather devastating for us. We actually sold our home in Southern California, got rid of our cars and pretty much everything that we owned to go. That is not a requirement of Mercy Ships at all. That was just a call that God put on my husband's life and really us. He said, I don't want any plan B. You need to trust me completely. So burn the ships, cut the ties, you know? And I was all in, I'm like, yeah, let's do this. Little did we know that, 10 months later, we'd be kind of floundering and not knowing where to go or what to do. But God was so extravagant in his provision. And we thought as an organization, we were going to go back, kind of like the rest of the world. This will last a couple months and we'll be fine. Well, a year and a half later of us kind of being vagabonds as a family of 5 in the midst of COVID, I said to my husband, we got kids in high school now. I kind of feel like we might need to settle down and let them finish their schooling. So we relocated to Northern California to be closer to our parents. And that's where I am now. And I do work remotely still for Mercy Ships.
Oh, how awesome. And do you still do the podcast? Because that was kind of in some of the literature. Do you do that too?
Yeah, the podcast is on a hiatus right now.
Okay.
And so I'm not sure if they're going to bring that back. We have over 100 episodes produced, though, and they are all from our crew and some of our staff at our International Support Center, but all telling their stories. So if anybody is listening who is like, well, I'm in finance, what could I do? Oh my gosh, Moise gave me a fabulous interview all about doing finance on board. A lot of nurses and doctors tell their stories and patient stories. There's a whole collection of some really, really great content. So there's some fun stuff to look into for sure.
How awesome.
Hmm.
So cool. So basically you are getting the word out and trying to get them like get people on rotations. And what are the time frames that you commit to? Like, is there short term or is there only long term or what is
Yeah,
the
there's kind of all of the above. It really depends on what role you're coming to serve in. So, for example, we might have some surgeons who come just for 2 weeks. They'll, take a leave of absence or a PTO from their hospital, and they will come and just do as many surgeries as they can in their area of expertise for those 2 weeks. We have the nurses that'll maybe come for a rotation, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. Usually it's about 3 months, though, is a kind of a general minimum commitment for our nurses in working in the wards and all different departments. Some of our receptionists or housekeepers, the galley staff, dining room staff, it's about a 3 month commitment at minimum. And then some of our other things, like when my husband committed to being a chaplain, it was a 2 year commitment. Most of our teachers commit for 2 years. One thing we find, though, is no matter what time frame you come for, most people end up staying a lot longer than they anticipated, or they will go home and then come right back because the community on board is absolutely incredible. It really is like living in the early church in a lot of ways, where they say in the book of Acts that everyone gave to each other according to their needs. That's one aspect of life on board is everybody takes care of each other, but there's also really like no hierarchy on board because we're all volunteers coming together with one common goal. Everybody is just together. And I might be sitting at dinner with my kids and the captain and a housekeeper and a surgeon, and we're all just buddies. We're all family. The
egos checked
community
at
is
the door?
incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's none of that. Everyone is there to help and to transform lives in Jesus' name. And so the community on board is really what people come back for over and over again. You meet friends from all over the world, and then all of a sudden you've got places to stay when you travel. It's
Yes.
pretty great.
I'm a travel bug for sure. And I just think that would be awesome. And especially
Yeah.
to do it. A lot of people tease me. They think I like to travel and call and do some ministry, and they think I'm just using the ministry to get to travel.
Oh,
And it's not at all. I love to travel, but the
yeah.
ministry is my heart. So
Yeah.
if the two can be married, that is like heaven
Absolutely.
for me.
Oh, for sure. And that's how I felt, kind of my husband and I both had traveled quite a bit. We both were in full-time ministry, um, prior to him being in law enforcement. And so we took mission trips with college students all over the world. And like I said, with my upbringing, I just love to travel. I wanted to give that to my children as well. I wanted to expose them to different parts of the world and the way that different cultures live. And why not do it when we could also share our faith and be ambassadors for Christ? So,
Absolutely. So, how old were your kids when this decision that you didn't think was going to happen started?
yeah. So my son was 10 years old. And then I have identical twin daughters that were 13 when we went on board. And then they all had respective birthdays while we were there. But great ages for kids to go because my kids were very engaged. To remember that it radically impacted all of our lives. And I can honestly say there is not a week that goes by or even a couple of days where we are not all talking about something about the ship. I mean, it radically impacted us. In fact, my daughters, I just dropped them off a month or so ago at university. They're freshmen at different universities. And my one daughter, Georgia, at 13 years old, God called her into the medical field. And now she's in nursing school. And all she wants to do is get out and get back on board and be a nurse on the ship. That's all she wants.
Praise the Lord. And you're
Yeah.
right, that is that close to junior high kind of
Hmm.
age. They're still, I adore my daughter. I do. She's 23. She's gonna be 24 next month, she lives with me while she's going to college. But when they get around that age, and you know too, and I know from when I was 23, she doesn't want to hang out necessarily with me, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, while junior high is kind of a really cool time where they're not know-it-alls yet.
Right.
And they're little sponges, and they're willing to like
Sure.
absorb and drill down for themselves, and that would have been really incredible. I know my daughter was 11 our last mission trip to Slovakia, where we did
Mm,
vacation Bible school but also taught English. And it was
yeah.
so awesome because the kids that we chose kids that are around her age. That's what she wanted. And they said to her, okay, we'll learn English if
Hmm.
you'll learn Slovak from us.
Oh,
That's our
wow.
requirement. And so she
Yeah.
had so much fun. I mean, she didn't learn, we were there 2.5 weeks, so
Yeah.
she didn't learn it communicatively, but she did learn
But
some,
phrases.
you know,
Yeah,
yeah. And it
sure.
was a really great time between us kids and between them. And there's a couple of them that follow me on social media. And so I
Mm.
get to see what's happening in their lives and how
Oh,
they've
how
gone off into the
neat.
world and the jobs they have. So you're right, the
Yeah,
connections are amazing. And so this is so
absolutely.
cool. And so part of the process with Mercy Ships is that you raise your own funding to go. Yes?
Yeah, so our crew on board are volunteers, and we really are a volunteer organization. There are different seasons in our organization where there's been different, I don't know, maybe support to eliminate some hurdles that some crew might have in coming. So we do have some kind of financial aid assistance that happens from time to time and, assistance with airfare cost. But for the most part, our crew do raise all of their support to come. And you quickly find that it's a lot less expensive to live on board than it is to live like for me in California.
Right.
It's very different. And also when you have those partners, it's not just financial support, but then you've got a team behind you that are praying for you and encouraging you. And they're really a part of the journey with you. It's just a biblical principle, biblical model of, support and sending people out.
Yeah, just like what do they call that? When somebody raises the money before they go on mission to like another country, what is that called? Deportation, maybe? Where they go
I'm
around
not
to
sure.
like churches and then talk to people about their ministry, and then people can like give a monthly pledge or whatever
Uh-huh.
it might be.
Sure.
So
Sure.
cool,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
And I suppose we can get all that information on the website too as to how much that might
Yeah.
be depending on where we're serving and what have you. And I saw that there were
Absolutely.
different kinds of cabins and stuff like that and
Well,
quarters
you
that
are
you.
assigned. You are assigned a cabin. You don't get to go browse and, pick pick what you want. But, a lot of our crew that come for short term, they won't be living alone. They'll be, kind of bunking up with some other folks. And it's a great way to, again, meet people from other cultures and things. But all the information you can find at mercyships.org, and specifically mercyships.org/serve is where you'll find a list of opportunities where people can apply to come on board with us. And, really, we, yes, need and desire volunteers to come and experience this for themselves. But also, we would love for people to partner with us in prayer and just pray for our patients, pray for our crew, pray for these nations where we're going to serve. I mean, these developing nations, people have little to no access to medical care whatsoever. And it's devastating because they're dying from benign diseases, things that we would never see in the United States or in the West, because we would just go to our doctor and say, I have a little bump. What is this? And they would remove it. But, for some of these people, they don't have any access to medical care. And those bumps will grow into massive benign tumors that will kill them because they'll be suffocated.
Right.
So it's pretty devastating, but it's amazing work that we get to do, and to see lives be transformed is pretty awesome.
And as I understand from some of the literature too, that it's not solely the mission of Mercy ships to just go show up and do some procedures and stuff, but
Yeah.
helping educate the areas you're going to as well. Because, I mean, if the conditions don't stop
Yeah.
continuing and taking place like that, I mean, you'll never have enough time as Mercy
Right.
ships to get to everybody in a specific area to keep fixing these situations like that are, like you said, that may be benign or innocuous.
Yeah.
So how does that work? How does the education in the area work? Are you go off
Hmm.
ship and go into the areas, or how does that work?
Yeah, I would actually probably say that even bigger than the surgeries that we perform for free is our education training and advocacy program. Because you're right, our ships come in, we can do some surgeries, and then we leave. But we have teams that are on the ground long before our ships ever arrive, building relationships with the government, the Ministry of Health, and already starting to develop relationships with whatever healthcare system these countries might have. And then after we leave, a lot of those teams and a lot of the training that has been in place will remain after we leave. And our desire really is to work ourselves out of a job, you know?
Right.
And so what we do is we do set up a lot of classrooms in country off the ship where we will go and teach safe surgical procedures. We'll teach sterilization.
Mm,
A lot of these places might have, for example, they might have surgery, but it's not safe surgery. The
yeah.
electricity is not consistent. Can you imagine being on the operating table and the power goes out, or they don't have proper sterilization processes?
Right.
Or maybe the surgery that's offered is not timely. When you can imagine if you have a ruptured appendix or something and you can't get timely surgery, you die. But even bigger than all of that, too, is just affordable, in these
Mm.
developing nations, and people are suffering from poverty. They couldn't afford something even if it was offered. So we do a lot of coursework on our new ship, the Global Mercy. We have simulators on board, and we will bring in local surgeons and doctors and allow them to train and learn how to do common procedures in our simulators. They will shadow our surgeons on board and get to perform, surgeries and be able to learn, and also to we train them to be trainers so they can go out as well and train other people in their areas of expertise so that they can care for their own people. So that's just like the tip of the iceberg. There is so much, but that's really the heart and soul of what we do, is training and advocating for these developing nations and really trying to bolster their healthcare systems so that they are able to care for their own people.
Well, and that would, it's just like Jesus said, as opposed to catching, or even, I don't know who said the proverb about catching a fish, as opposed to teaching somebody to fish and they can eat for their life, is,
Right.
yeah, that you want to be able to leave that imprint back.
Yeah,
And I think that's even in missions, like
sure.
people from within each of the nations are going
Yeah.
to be able to reach other people for Jesus way better than
Hmm.
somebody who shows up looking like they're just trying to be like,
Yeah.
yay, for me, I showed up and I'm telling you about my Jesus, which we can
Right.
do. And that's
Right.
awesome. But I think when things are in country and they're
Yes.
your fellow man of your country, I
Yeah.
think that's received with a little bit more of an open heart because
Hmm.
trust around the world and division
Oh,
has
yeah.
just been beat up a little bit of late.
Absolutely. And another thing that we do along those lines is, as I mentioned, our volunteers on board, they're from all over the world coming with their expertise and their experience. But when we pull into port, we also then employ over 250 to 300 local people to come on board every day to serve in every department as our translators, not only language translators, but also cultural translators. So you can imagine, an African person coming in for surgery. Well, they've never seen a ship before. They're terrified. Majority of the people are white, and it's like, what am I doing right now? But to have, oh, here's another Senegalese person wearing scrubs who's speaking my language, who's helping me through the process. I mean, that changes everything.
Absolutely.
And so we do, yes, we have a lot of local people on board. And the thing that's so amazing is our day crew workers, they are phenomenal people. And a lot of them, they will go on to become crew with us and stay on board with us for several years. Some of them they're highly educated, they're highly trained, they're brilliant people. They speak multiple languages. They're essential to what we do. Because if we don't have, like you're saying, someone who really inspires trust in our patients, like, oh, I can trust you because this person looks like me, they speak my language, they understand my cultural nuances, then we're not doing a very good job, if we don't bridge that gap. And we definitely believe that just love is a universal language. So even just smiling at our patients and looking them in the eye and telling them they matter when maybe their community has completely shunned them because they've been deemed cursed because of their conditions. Just the love they receive on board is transformational, but also to have people that can speak their language is really important.
Sure. And especially, you bring somebody on board and tell them, okay, get undressed now, and then we're going to take you over here and we're going to cut you open. That freaks me out in English.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a big deal. So,
Well, that's just awesome. And I knew that would have to be the case. I mean, because how can you with just two ships, you're like the amazing impact, but you're still like, wouldn't it be great if there were 20 ships around the world that were able to help in a similar manner? That would just be so wonderful. And I just see the transformations, and I can only imagine,
mm-hmm.
Just being able to have like a cleft palate fixed or something like that, where, like you said, in a community has shunned you because you're lame, and now, you have this transformation. Just in their own little soul, how that has to be
Oh,
just,
yeah. It's incredible.
redeeming,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And
that's so
it's not
awesome.
just the patients' lives who are changed, but
Sure.
really their families and their communities are totally changed. And even beyond that, I always say that really anyone who steps foot on one of our vessels, they are never the same again.
Yeah.
All our crew, me, my family, our lives are forever changed because of our time on board.
My daughter, when we were in Slovakia, there was a church there. It had been predominantly communist, or the churches were Catholic predominantly. So this center where the missionary that we lived with operated out of, it was a Baptist church now,
Mm-hmm.
and the center. So anyway, we go to morning church on Sunday, and they're singing contemporary Christian music, but in Slovak. So
Yeah.
it was so fun because we recognized the
Sure.
tune and whatever.
Yeah.
And here's my daughter, she's 10 years old, and she looks up at me and she goes, Mommy, God's not American.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No,
I was like, the
that's
eyes
massive.
of a child. I think,
Yeah.
honestly, getting out of our country where you walk into a store and there's 800 kinds of apples just for one piece of food, you know what I
Yep.
mean? And
Yep.
seeing that there's not that kind of abundance everywhere, but yet
Yeah.
seeing that, yes, this is creation. God
Yeah.
created us all, and he's moving there, and that's why he called us to go there, and
Yeah.
I think that's incredible. I think it is. Every one of them have been life-changing experiences for my daughter and
Sure.
I.
Sure.
So
I think that was probably one of the biggest life changes for me living on board, was to quickly realize how American and how Western my faith is.
mm,
And, even being in a Bible study with a group of women on board, there was a woman from Switzerland, from Brazil, from the Netherlands, from England, and a couple Americans. And we would be reading scripture and they would be making comments. And in my head, I was like, ooh, that's not right. That's not what that means. That's not what that says. And after a couple of weeks, I'd be like, ooh, I'm kind of wrong. That is what that says. That is what that means. Oh my goodness. And just to have your biblical worldview expanded and realize, you know what? God's not American.
Yeah.
I was never taught that growing up, but, I think that, to really realize that our God is so much bigger and that the God of the Bible maybe isn't necessarily the God that I was raised hearing about. And to have my biblical worldview blown apart was pretty awesome. And I'm so, so grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times what we're getting is someone's interpretation when what we should be receiving is the Holy Spirit's interpretation directly. And I've learned this recently with my book, because telling my story up to some Christians, they feel it's controversial and I should change or I should do this or that. And God just very clearly, after a couple of weeks of struggling for me, said, Michele, number one, stop listening to vertical voices. You need to
Yeah.
hear my voice.
Yeah.
And number two, I don't have a plan B. I called you to this and I want you to do it the way I told you and let's move on,
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
you said, there's no plan B. When he calls
Right.
us to something, if we don't like burn the ships, as you said, then we are saying to God, okay, that's lovely, but I don't really trust where you're taking me.
Right.
And yeah, this has been quite a journey for me. And this sounds so exciting. I'm actually a little fired back up at the idea.
Do it.
Yeah. Because what I do for my job, I don't know how my boss would feel about me leaving for 3 months, but it's bookkeeping. And if there's internet access on the ship, ooh, bless you, I could easily complete my job overnight while I do whatever else during the day. And so it wouldn't be this disastrous thing where I have to give up a job to get to go serve for a little bit. So we'll see.
Yeah. You
We'll
never
see.
know. You
I
never
mean, and the
know.
man he has for me, I told him, I go, clearly I'm not going to find him sitting on my couch at home unless it's the prime delivery guy. So this could be a very fascinating alternative.
Yes, you never know. You
Well,
never
this has been
know.
really awesome. I loved hearing. Is your one daughter the only one who, I mean, I'm not going to say the only one that was impacted. Your whole family was. But are the other kids looking at ministry as something where they want to head because of this experience, or what are
You
they? What
know,
did they get out of it?
yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, they got a ton out of it. I kind of think life is ministry. I think it
Sure.
doesn't matter where you are, to be able to know Jesus and make him known in the workplace and corporate, in business, wherever you serve, it should be your ministry,
Sure.
right? I mean, my husband being a first responder for 20 years, that was his ministry. Um, but yeah, I mean, all the kids, I think for my son, his eyes were just totally opened to ways that you can be a follower of Christ and use your gifts and talents that isn't standing behind a pulpit in a church, to make friends with the engineers on board and, the various departments. He realized, yeah, I can totally be a businessman and I can use my gifts for God in this realm. All the
Amen.
kids we're just totally impacted by, even like I said, the other cultures. They've got friends now all over the world and they still keep in touch. Yeah, so I mean, everybody has been impacted in quite a deep way.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We can't ask for anything different than that. And we can't hold a gun to our kids' heads and say, you have to believe in Jesus or you have to live this kind of life. For them to be able to use the brain God created for us,
Yeah.
our own kind of critical thinking skills and our own kind of listening to the Holy Spirit about what we can do. And he's absolutely right. And it's such a simple thing for a teenager or a kid to understand. And yet there are 40 and 50-year-olds who don't get that. I mean, and
Yeah.
I've heard both sides of it. There are people who say you can't work in the world and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, 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 no. We were called to be that light in that darkness. Now,
Of
if we
course.
become of the world and we start taking on their thought processes, it's another story. But that's absolutely beautiful. I love that.
Hmm.
Um, okay, so everybody I have on the podcast, I have a
Yes.
final nugget I ask them.
Oh
And
no.
the older we get, and I'm not, you are very young, but the older we get, there's probably more than one, but I just want one, is I ask, what is the one thing that you wish you had been told sooner or had learned sooner?
Mm. Well, I might take a left turn here.
Okay.
um, I am grateful that I was told at a very young age and really told through my whole growing up so that it became ingrained in me is that I'm a child of God. And my mom used to tell us when we left for school in the morning, she would say, "You're a child of the king. Don't act like an orphan." And, we'd kind of be like, "Oh, mom, whatever," but as that was ingrained in me over and over again, in my later teen years and in my 20s, I started to really think about those words. You are a child of the king. Don't act like an orphan. In other
Awesome.
words, don't act like you're nothing to nobody. Don't act like nobody cares about you. Don't act like, depression has the final word in your life. Don't act like, brokenness is what defines you. You are a child of God and you are a child of the king. So don't act like an orphan. So I am grateful that I had a mom that taught me that from the time I was little, and that I can embrace that truth and that I get to pass it on to my kids. I tell them all the time, you're a child of the king, don't act like an orphan. In other words, all that comes with being a child of God means we have been given the full inheritance of our God and we are co-heirs with Christ. So let's not live like we're impoverished. We
Right.
have been given all that we need because we have the presence of God with us.
Awesome. I love that. That's awesome. And I think it's so funny because I lost my mother about 6 years ago, but she and
Sorry.
her adoptive mom, my grandma, both of them had the most wild sayings that were part Bible, part, hills of Kentucky kind of stuff. And people laugh all the time. They're like, "Where did you get that?" And I'm like, you know what? I used to roll my eyes at my mom and the things that she said when I was younger, but now I'm looking at them and I'm going, there's some wisdom. There's
Yeah,
wisdom nuggets in here, and I get to pass them on to my daughter so she can roll her eyes at me.
there you go.
Well, this
Absolutely.
has been delightful, hun. This is so
Yes.
awesome and so informative. I can't wait to get this episode out there because I really think that this is a delightful ministry and a great way for people, like you said, too, that don't feel quite, they feel like maybe they have to be behind a pulpit to have an impact. And yet here they can be serving dinner
Yeah,
on the ship and still be a part of delivering a relationship with Jesus to the community around them. So
absolutely.
I want to thank you all for coming to class. This has been really fun, and I'm really excited to go kind of drill back into mercy ships myself. I think it just would be a world of good for so many folks because it really truly does let you see that God is an American and that he is created the world and that he loves the world and he wants you to do the same. So if you want to check out Mercy Ships, you go to mercyships.org, as well as her Raeanne's connection information will be in the show notes. And so will mine if you want to reach out through us, however you want to do that. But go to your favorite platform, like, review, engage. We'd love every bit of it. And we just want to thank you for coming to class today. And class dismissed. This episode of Old School with Michele Vrabel is brought to you by The Lathered Crown, a hair and scalp spa here in the Phoenix area.